Hey Ori, hey Vinci. ¿Cómo estás? Hey Isabella. Welcome to the Nook. How are you? Hey Mari. I love you, baby girl. This looks like a really good book. I was reading it some on lunch today and I was like, ooh, this is going to be good. Hey, Nina, asshats out there weed eating, if you can believe that. No, it's very, very, very well written, Isabella. Very well. My granddaughter's name is Isabella. We call her Bella or Bell Bell. I think you go by Easy, don't you? Is it you? Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, the all the different voices, all the different voices. I'm learning to do voices, and I try to look over the books ahead of time and try to get down how many voices I'm going to need to do. But sometimes I have to change them on the fly because I'll miss a character or two. So yeah, it's I enjoy it. I enjoy doing this. I'm getting ready to come up on my. You heard my Spanish. That's about the limit of my Spanish too. Ori is also known as Nina on here, and she's Puerto Rican, and so she's been slowly teaching me how to speak some Spanish. I bought uh, a lifetime subscription to Rosetta Stone, and still don't take the time to do it. So, yeah, I don't know. I'll get around to learning it someday. Thank you for spreading the word. I appreciate that. My pronunciation. Oh, great. Now, you realize I have a very southern accent. I'm so glad this is in Florida too. So that in not like Miami or somewhere, but this is a good part of Florida that I might be able to sound a little natural about it. Um uh yeah, my Spanish is kind of it's going to be funny. Oh, one night I was reading a book that was written um I mean, it was written in English, but uh, it took place. It was set over in Greek. Oh crap! I think I did some of that too. Um, I'm not very good at Greek at all. Am I, Vinci? It was set over in Italy, and all of a sudden, just out of the blue, it started spouting off Italian in there, and I read it, and Nina is married to an Italian. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she's like, you did so good on that. And I was like, well, it's not too far from Spanish, so maybe I did okay. Oh, there is, isn't it? Uh, is Greek a Latin language? Oh Lord, this is going to be bad. I can already tell. Yeah, I'm going to mess it up. You realize I have a very southern accent, right? God, this is going to be bad. Alrighty, let's get started, ladies. I bet Ori fell off. I bet she's getting her phone back so she can watch it there, or her computer, whatever. Swap with Mari so that she can come on as Nina. Alrighty, so the cover, I'm not sure if you can tell what the cover is on here, but this light streaming down the center there it's a cave, it's an underwater cave, and this is a scuba diver. So this is not one of those covers you can really tell online what it is. There's lots of fish, and it's an underwater cave. So Last Man Out by Isabella Adams. And let's do this. Tony had not expected this. He had not expected Ross to fight back, at least not with any kind of gusto. He knew killing the pretentious bastard would be difficult, but Tony had underestimated just how strong Ross actually was. He always thought Ross was just a little pussy. Tony had been wrong. He growled internally, chastising himself for failing to account for the obvious truism that one can never predict what a man will do when faced with his own demise. Uh-oh. The most irritating thing was that originally Tony had not wanted to include Ross on this project. It was his partner who had insisted. Then, as expected, Ross blabbed his plans, and now Tony had to kill him. "We can't trust him," Tony had said. He urged his partner to keep Ross in the dark. "The punk ass don't know how to keep his mouth shut." He took a swig of cold beer and glared at Ross where he stood at the bar, pontificating about something obscure in an effort to impress two underaged blondes. The skinny man across from Tony leaned in. He shifted his gaze from Ross at the bar and to Tony's dark, sunken eyes. He's got the gear and the money. We need him." Now, drifting gently along one of the underground tunnels that snaked through the bedrock of Florida, Tony reflected on that night. While it usually brought him a sense of satisfaction to say, "I told you so," this time only left him annoyed. "You kill him," Tony had insisted. "You're the one who decided to tell him everything." The skinny man shook his head. "Nah, you're the one who's got the muscle to do it. Besides, he don't trust me." With good reason, Tony mused. He kept this to himself, however. That night, he simply rolled his eyes and nodded. So it was decided that Tony would take Ross for one last dive, and what better place to kill someone than the silence of Florida's water-filled caves. Here, everything was quiet. No noise, no cars, no people clamoring for more of what they thought they wanted. Down here, life was peaceful. The caves were Tony's quiet, peaceful paradise. Life in the caves existed in the silence. The soft floors settled with muted anonymity, and any intrusion upset the indefectible serenity. Oh, you're one of those big word people. Big words read good when you're reading silently to yourself, but when you're reading them out loud, you don't realize how often you don't speak them. Diving in the cave took patience and skill. If Tony was too powerful, clouds of thick sediment billowed into the water and obscured his vision. In order to move through the water, Tony used subtlety. He only had to swish his toes and he floated along. The time for subtlety, however, was gone. When they reached the chosen spot, Tony stopped swimming. The stretch of tunnel he picked for Ross's final dive was narrow and the clearance was low. The two of them, plus their gear, easily took up the whole space. Tony knew the limited room might make killing Ross harder, but this particular area was a crevice in which Tony could secure the body. Even better, people had been found dead here before. Here was perfect. When they reached the chosen, Tony drew a deep breath through his regulator and tapped his dive partner on the shoulder. When Ross turned around, Tony ripped the regulator from his mouth. A look of confused horror bloomed behind Ross's mask, and without skipping a beat, Ross did what he was trained to do. He dipped his face down and reached for a lanyard, his spare breathing apparatus. It was supposed to be attached to his chest so he could breathe without using his hands if he needed to. Ross's lips groped for the silicone mouthpiece, but it wasn't there. Tony had ripped it away too. My boss just got his master diver's certification license, whatever, and he's been bragging. As a matter of fact, he's supposed to be back to work tomorrow because I have a feeling he's been down in the Gulf diving. So some of this is kind of getting to be familiar. He's talked about it so much. As Ross panicked, searching fruitlessly for an air source, Tony grabbed his arms behind his back and squeezed. Ross thrashed. Tony tightened his grip and felt Ross's shoulder pop out of place. A groan of pain was audible even through the water. The trapped man's flailing fins kicked up silt from the cave floor, and Tony's vision was compromised. Physically, Ross looked like a skinny little bitch, and Tony was pissed that killing him was taking so much effort. It was then that, with growing ire, Tony realized he had underestimated his opponent. He squeezed Ross's arm closer together, punishing the struggling diver for fighting back. God damn you, Tony thought. Crack. Tony's nose, as Ross... Here it is. I stand for my tablet. I just had it propped and it was sliding. Tony's nose broke as Ross threw his head back. White heat shot through Tony's skull. Far from achieving its intended goal of freeing him, Ross's action only fueled Tony's anger. Die already, you piece of shit! Blood poured into Tony's mask. Bubbles formed as warm liquid surged into the small space. Still, Tony held Ross's arms tight. It wouldn't be long now. Again, Ross floundered. Tony tasted metallic liquid on the back of his tongue and blew out hard through his regulator in an attempt to clear his airway. Ross's fins churned up more silt, and what was left out of Tony's visibility was gone. Blood stung his eyes, and he closed his lids tight. Just remember your training. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Tony knew his training was meant to save lives, not end them. He ignored those thoughts and pushed away any doubt about his plan. It had to be done. Soon, Ross stopped fighting as hard. Soon, his body, covered in thousands of dollars of dive gear, went limp. Tony gave the dead body a rueful shove. Bastard. He took his mask off and spit out his regulator. He tasted dirt and blood in the back of his throat. The silty water stung his nostrils, but with a firm blow, he cleared out enough blood to be able to see. Or so he hoped. Tony hit the purge button on his regulator and replaced it in his mouth. In the small dark space, he methodically cleaned his mask and carefully placed it back on his face. He tilted his head back and blew out, sealing the edge securely on his cheeks and forehead. Tony felt around the limp body for Ross's regulator. He grabbed the brand new silicone and rubber mouthpiece and shoved it into the dead man's water-filled mouth. Tony snarled. Ross had always acted superior to the other cave divers they knew. He always had to have the best gear, dive the best sides. Gear didn't do shit for you now, did it, you smug little bitch? Tony pushed the dead body deeper into the cave, making sure it was lodged firmly against the chosen fissure. It had to look like Ross got stuck, panicked, and drowned. Once Tony felt confident about the body's position, he turned around and focused on finding his line markers. Soon he located the nylon line laid months ago. He felt the plastic triangles stamped with his initials and followed them back out to the cave system. The line itself stretched back to the cavern through which they had entered the miles and miles of tortuous tunnels which twisted their way under the state of Florida. It was Tony's ticket to safety. Most people in Florida did not even know the cave existed. Most people weren't aware of the miles of secret passages that connected Florida's natural springs. The water cleared as Tony moved further from the kill site. His powerful dive light cut through the darkness like high beams in a snowstorm. A white catfish squirmed across his cone of illumination, and Tony jumped, hitting his head on the roof of the cave. Sediment fell down around him. Damn it, it was just a fish. Once he could see the small area of light shining through the water high above him, Tony knew he was out of the cave. He passed by the warning sign posted at the entrance to every known cave in Florida. Stop. Prevent your death. Go no further. Fact. More than 300 divers, including open water scuba instructors, have died in caves just like this one. Fact. You need training to dive. You need cave training and cave equipment to cave dive. Fact. Without cave training and cave equipment, divers can die here. Fact. It can happen to you. There's nothing in this cave worth dying for. Do not go beyond this point. Tony chuckled at the irony. He sat silently at the bottom of the natural spring for a few moments, enjoying the comfort of the water. When he was ready, he pulled off his mask again. With vicious force, he smashed one of the lenses against his knee. The glass broke but did not shatter. Perfect. He reached out his arm and dropped the beloved piece of gear. The plastic and glass, the window through which Tony had seen so much of heaven, swayed back and forth as it drifted to the soft, sandy sand next to the warning sign. After a moment, he drew a deep breath through his regulator. Damn, this is going to hurt. He kicked hard off the ground like an untied balloon when let go. Tony shot up to the surface of the calm, innocent-looking water. The Florida morning, Chapter 2. The Florida morning air was saturated with mist. Andromeda Marcos pushed herself through the humidity, even though she felt like she was breathing in a cloud. With every breath, she tasted the salt suspended in the morning fog. The mangroves nearby were rife with water birds indigenous to this area of the state. When she did not have her earbuds in, Andy occasionally heard the eerie cry of an osprey as it brought food back to its young, perched high on top of a telephone pole. Her phone vibrated in her hand, and a photo of her mother popped up on the screen. If it's not one thing, it's her mother, Andy thought. She had to slow down to trot while she answered. Ella, Mama, she answered in Greek. The high-pitched cackle of a red-headed woodpecker sounded from nearby, chastising Andy for interrupting its breakfast. Oh, yeah, this is funny. Thank you so much, Isabella. Miahasis. I have no idea if I said that even close to being right. I am old and alone and... Oh, wait a minute. I'm doing the mama voice now. Miahasis. I am old and alone and you don't call. I could have fallen and you would never know. Where did the British accent come from? Dang. I could be dead. Are you out running again? Are you alone? Andromeda, you know better. There are men out there just waiting to take women and do horrible things to them. Maha, please. And about last night, I'm sorry, I forgot. Andy wanted to add a comment about her mother obviously not being dead, but she managed to hold her tongue. She was supposed to have called her widowed mother back the night before. The truth is that she had not forgotten. She just didn't want to hear the lecture about living so close but not coming over enough. Andy was sure that even if she lived with her mother, it wouldn't be enough. She also didn't want to answer more questions about why she and her ex-husband Pete were not living together or why he didn't escort her on her morning runs. Okay. Haramu. I forgive you. I forgive you. So are you and Petros coming for Sunday brunch? Sunday brunch? Andy had to stop running altogether. The reminder of the obligatory weekly meal exhausted her energy. She pushed frizzy black curls out of her oval olive toned face. She paused before answering. She drew in a lungful of the wet air in an attempt to calm herself. Andy stood on the Pinellas Trail at 6:13 a.m., catching her breath and trying not to yell at her 75-year-old mother. She turned to the wooded side of the trail and peered in between the leaves. Haramu. Okay, Haramu. So I did get it right the first time, then I changed it. I'm not having this conversation with you again, Ma. We're divorced, she finally said. And I have to finish my run and get back home. Callie has to be at school in like an hour. Oh. Que calipio moo. Her mother's voice softened. She had a tender spot for her only granddaughter. How is she? She has a phone, Ma. You can call her yourself. Andy instantly felt bad for snapping. Her mother lived alone in the same house Andy had grown up in, and what she needed was love and connection with her family, not impatience. Sorry, Mama. Look, if I promise to come by tonight, can I finish my run without having to hang up on you? Always in such a hurry. Her mother made a tisk sound on the other end of the line. Oh, now this is funny. Yeah, no, I would even. Dusk Andromeda Moon Sagapo Prosehe tonight. There are lots of crazy there are lots of crazy men out there who would grab you. I don't want to read about you in the paper. I love you too, Mama, and I'll be careful. I promise. That was horrible. Andy jabbed at the screen of her phone harder than necessary, but the call didn't end. She got frustrated and had to hit it 2 more times before the signal finally dropped. Gamato, Jamato, Jamato, she thought. If it's not one thing, it's your mother. 17 minutes later, Andy stepped through the sliding glass door into her dining room. She pulled it closed behind her and locked it. She stopped and closed her eyes, momentarily enraptured by the pure joy of air conditioning. She breathed in the cold, dry air and reflected that it somehow felt sharper and cleaner. Her brain wandered to the last time she changed the return vent filters, and she made a mental note to add that to her never ending to do list. Andy's 2-year-old Great Dane Athena bounded to her as she stood with her eyes closed. The gigantic, can't even get gigantic down. Oh, I'm sure. Gamato or Jamato? G. All right, Gamato. Okay, gotcha. Gamato. Oh, I learned. Or are you still on here? La Para last week. That's bitch. In Spanish. I learned that last week from a book. So that's what I've been calling Nina. uh, okay. Andy's 2-year-old Great Dane Athena bounded to her as she stood with her eyes closed. The gigantic dog leaned heavily against her sticky legs. Andy knew that she would have short, brindle-colored hair stuck to her skin when she got into the shower. Fall on the west coast of Florida can be Eden or Hades. It all depends on the day. On this particular day in October, Andy's morning run had not been ideal. The mist among the mangroves was beautiful. It shrouded the coast in quiet mystery, but it also meant that Andy had to run in 100% humidity. On days like this, there was no hope of staying dry. No sweat would evaporate ever. It had no place to go. So her long hair and her running clothes were soaking wet as she basked in the glorious cold of her dining room. Mom! Callie's voice held the questioning disdain of teenagerhood. What are you doing? Andy looked over at her daughter sitting at the dining table nearby. She had her journal in front of her as she ate breakfast. Andy felt a thing start to lick the drying sweat off her legs. I see you're not ready yet. Andy moved to the living room and collapsed on the floor under the ceiling fan. Nope, Callie answered with a mouthful of cereal. Andy spread her arms out to her side and enjoyed the gentle movement of air around her. Her skin started to itch where the sweat was drying. She closed her eyes again and tried to pull together enough energy to shower and get ready for work. Thank God it's Friday, she thought. Is your stuff ready for the weekend at least? She asked from the ground. There was no answer. Andy raised her head and looked toward the dining room. Callie was still there, eating her Cheerios. Hello? Is your stuff ready for your weekend with your dad? She added an edge to her voice. Andy felt that with teenagers, you sometimes had to stoop to their level. Callie rolled her eyes. Yes, stop asking, okay? Andy laughed and dropped her head back onto the bamboo laminate. Ouch, she said under her breath. She hit the floor harder than she had intended. Someone is extra teenaged this morning, Andy said louder. She could almost hear the eye roll from where she lay. She groaned as she pulled herself up and walked to her daughter. Andy loved to run, but some days running did not love her back. She knew that lying under cold, moving air after a run wasn't going to help her muscles recover any faster. But jumping right into a hot shower without cooling down wasn't a great option either. It's just that you asked me like 16 times, Callie grumped. And you, Koremu, answered me only once. Andy wrapped her arms around her only child. Callie had inherited Andy's average height, but she was developing the same voluptuous curves that Pete's mother had. She easily could have been a model for the ancient Greek statues Andy's mother kept around her house. In spite of Callie's protestations, Andy squeezed her tight. Ugh, gross! Mom, your clothes are disgusting. Get away. Andy pulled away, but not before planting a salty kiss on Callie's forehead. Okay, enough with that. Watch your attitude. And seriously, get yourself and your stuff for the weekend ready by the time I'm out of the shower. We're leaving in 20 minutes. On most days, Dr. Andromeda Marcos started seeing patients at 8:30. On this particular Friday, however, she had agreed to come in early to accommodate a new patient. As she got into the shower, she had no way of knowing that this new patient held a dark secret, or that this secret would someday soon put her life in danger. Chapter 3. Was that thumbs up for my what was it? Koremu? Chapter 3. He says he put Vicks on it and now it burns worse than before. Andy's medical assistant, Stella, called her before she reached the office. Marco's family medicine had patients of all ages, but being in Florida, there was a high percentage of older people who came to the office for care. Word eventually got around that Andy spoke Greek, and her patient population quickly became overwhelmingly Greek-speaking and overwhelmingly geriatric. Andy rubbed her eyes. It was going to be a long Friday. Okay, have him come in to see the wound care nurse and tell him that menthol and diabetic foot ulcers don't mix, she said. I'm almost there. As she ended the call with Stella, the phone rang again. Maria, ¿cómo estás, querida? Andy answered. Ay, mi madre, the baby is sick, so I'm not sure I'll make it to breakfast tomorrow. I'm sorry. Since Andy returned to Tarpon Springs after medical school, she and three of her childhood best friends had been meeting every Saturday at the same restaurant for breakfast. Occasionally, something interrupted the ritual, vacation, childbirth, a wedding, but not even her divorce or being on call had kept her from the standing date. Come on, Mama. Wani can take care of her, Andy replied. Maria was a middle school teacher. She was the most responsible of the four friends. She also was Cuban American, which meant that, like Andy, her life was dictated to a large degree by her culture. Maria sighed on the other end of the line. Andy heard a baby whimpering nearby. Whatever you need, honey, Andy said more gently. Can I do anything to help? Gracias, mommy. But no, you know what? Pray for healing, okay? Maria made a shushing sound as she attempted to soothe her ill child. Will do, Andy said. I hope she feels better and I hope we see you tomorrow. Ooh, that's a word I don't know. Cuídate, quiera, igual, mami. Andy walked through the back door. Nina, how'd I do? Andy walked through the back door of her office a few moments later and grabbed a cup of Bustelo coffee before heading to her office. Gracias, Lupe. She called down the hall. The front desk girl routinely spoiled her by having espresso ready when she arrived every morning. Claro que sí, doctora, she heard in return. Andy rushed behind her desk and dropped her bag into the large drawer that was supposed to hold files. Stella followed her and stood waiting. Hey, Stella, good morning. How's Mr. Papadopoulos? Oh, that's one of those. I love that name, Papadopoulos. He'll be here this morning sometime. He says he'll try not to use the Vicks anymore on his ulcers. Yeah, he said that the last time, too. Andy pulled on her white coat as Stella handed her the papers she had been holding. Is this the new patient? She looked down at the intake form. Follow up from hyperbaric treatment? Seriously? Stella shrugged. I guess there was a diving accident and he had to go to the decompression chamber. Her voice dropped. He says that his dive partner died in the cave. He says that he got so freaked out that he lost his mask and just swam up toward the light. Ended up with decompression sickness. It's a good thing he was able to call for help. Andy looked at the paperwork again. No known allergies, history of sinus surgery, allergy medicine and nasal spray daily, and a Sudafed is needed. Yep, definitely a scuba diver. Andy's ex husband Pete was a technical diver. He owned a small dive shop near the Sponge Docks in downtown Tarpon Springs, the small town in which Andy was born and raised. Pete's place was a hole in the wall, really, but he loved it. Actually, he loved it so much that it was one of the reasons they were now divorced. Civilly divorced, that is. In the eyes of the Greek Orthodox Church and Andy's mother, they were still married. The church did not recognize the legal rulings of the state of Florida. So every Sunday, Andy, Pete, and Callie went to Sunday Mass with her mother. They all sat together and pretended to be a good little intact family. Andy did her best not to bicker with her cheating ex-husband while in church. Some days she was more successful than others. Andy sighed. She was a certified cave diver as well, and while she was a family practitioner by training, she specialized in dive medicine. Anytime a diver was injured or needed to follow up with after decompression treatment, they came to Andy. Some days she regretted this choice. It only reminded her of younger, more foolish days. Is he nice? She asked Stella. Stella shrugged again. He seemed okay, a little jumpy, kind of gave me the creeps, but whatever. His pressure and pulse were up a bit. First visit and all. Andy looked at the vitals. He's young, so let's hope it's just white coat syndrome and nothing to do with his decompression sickness, she thought. When she walked into the room, she changed her opinion. Something about him told her his abnormal vital signs had nothing to do with being at a new doctor's office. And she doubted it had anything to do with his recent episode of decompression sickness or the bends either. The man who greeted her stood up and shook her hand. His palm was sweaty and he was shaking. He looked her in the eye, and instantly Andy was suspicious. Mr. Anthony Siegel, she said as she completed their greeting. I'm Dr. Marcos. Tony. Yeah, Tony. Everyone calls me Tony. After work, Andy drove to the sponge docks to drop Callie off at her father's shop. The smell of stale cigarette smoke and neoprene greeted her as she stepped into the dark, cluttered store. There's my girls. Pete moved out from behind the cash register where he was closing out for the night. He hugged Callie and attempted to kiss Andy. Don't even think about it. She held her arm out straight, her palm stiff against his chest. Aw, Moon, no, so hostile. His dark eyes were accusatory as he walked back to his piles of credit card receipts and cash. He pulled his shirt collar away from his neck, exposing a jungle of curly gray hair bursting to escape. He continued with his accounting. The last thing Andy wanted to do was engage in an unnecessary conversation with her ex-husband, but she knew that Pete would know about the dive accident. Her desire to know more about her patient won out against her hatred of talking to Pete. She casually asked if he had heard anything about any incidents recently. Why do you ask? Pete, Pete asked. I just heard a rumor. He gave her a sideways look. Yeah, a couple of amateurs went into Wild Boar Springs. Only one came out. I heard he got the bends, ascended like an idiot. Frankie actually got called to pull out the body. Pete jerked his head in the direction of his competition down the dock. His annoyance that the police called Frankie instead of him shone on his face like a neon sign. Goddamn tourists think, oh, a cave, how cool, let's go see. Fucking idiots. Pete, really, watch your mouth in front of your daughter. Mom, it's not like I haven't heard it before, Callie said. She was sitting in a dirty canvas chair amidst dusty gear in a corner. Now it was Andy's turn to roll her eyes. She looked from her daughter to her ex-husband. Whatever, she said. Okay, Pete, I'll see you at church on Sunday. I'll see you at church on Sunday. Pete leaned across the scratched yellowing plexiglass display cabinet and lowered his voice. Andy, can't I just bring her back tomorrow? I mean, I have students. I have to teach sometime. Andy knew that Callie could still hear him, and her heart ached for her daughter. Don't be an asshole, Andy said in a half whisper. Louder, she said, I'll see you Sunday. She walked to Callie and kissed her on her head. She bent down and said into her ear, If you need to come home early, call me. I'll come get you. Sure, Mom. Callie's voice was dismissive, but Andy knew she was grateful for the offer. As Andy walked toward the door, she said to Pete, And don't pretend like I don't know about your students. I still have the pictures. As the bell over the door sounded, Andy heard Pete's voice call after her. How many times I gotta tell you, that wasn't me. Maybe I can get one more in. Chapter 4. When Andy got home, she grabbed a big glass of water and downed 4 ibuprofen. She gathered a book and headed into a hot bath. Athena plodded along happily next to her and settled onto the bathroom floor. Friends had told Andy the jacuzzi tub. Kerida. Kerida. Okay. Kerida. Gotcha. Dang. I'm just gonna let you teach me Spanish and Greek. I'd love to learn Greek. That would be awesome. I don't know where I'd ever use it, but I'd love to learn it. Let's see. The jets hit her back and feet. She draped a washcloth over her eyes and breathed in the steam, hoping to get rid of the dull ache that was threatening to engulf her entire skull. She tried to push her day out of her mind, but could not stop thinking about her first patient. He certainly had the paperwork to prove he had the bends. His records from the hyperbaric medicine department at the local hospital definitely showed that he had ascended too quickly to the surface and that nitrogen bubbles had formed in his blood. Andy imagined how painful that must have been. On her honeymoon with Pete, she had experienced a mild case of the bends. She had a little dizziness and her fingertips and lips got numb, and that was after a rapid ascent from only 40 feet. But Tony Siegel had cut through at least 150 feet of water in a matter of seconds. He would have suffered a full blown case of decompression sickness. She could almost feel the pain that he must have suffered in all of his joints. The pain, like a drill, would have moved into his muscles and then deep into his bones, causing excruciating agony. The confusion, the numbness, the rash over his entire body. Andy had seen it become before and did not wish that on anyone. Ultimately, the bends can be fatal if not treated quickly. It was lucky that he had access to a decompression chamber and that he got there in time to prevent seizures, paralysis, and death. Andy resituated the washcloth on her face in an attempt to settle her mind. She tried thinking about kayaking with Callie or her run in the morning, but she couldn't stop seeing his face in her mind's eye. His nose was healing from a recent fracture, one he said he sustained when he and his dive partner became disoriented. He said his partner freaked out and thrashed around, that some flailing body part hit him in the face during the struggle, breaking his nose and his dive mask. But there was something about his eyes. The skin around his eyes had been swollen and was the sickly chartreuse color of a receding bruise. Black eyes are common during a nose fracture, so that wasn't what bothered her, although it didn't help make him look less disturbing. What Andy couldn't get over was the look in his eyes. He had been nervous, and she could tell he had tried hard to keep eye contact with her. This was the first thing that had made her suspicious. Pete only looked her in the eyes if he was lying or if he wanted something from her. The second thing was how blank his gaze had been. Andy had felt like the conversation happening in her head during the visit was so strong that he had to close off his mind completely in order to keep it from getting out. It was as if if he wasn't careful, Andy would be able to hear his thoughts. 11 years of medical practice had honed Andy's ability to read someone. She usually could tell when she was being lied to. She generally was very good at figuring out what the lie was, too. But this one had been difficult. He had seemed so tormented in his eyes. His eyes just had been so dead. When Andy woke up the next morning, her headache was gone. She donned her running clothes and was happy to discover that the humidity had been replaced by fresh fall air. She finished her run still full of energy. She showered and headed to the beach for her regular Saturday morning breakfast with her friends. When she arrived at the cabana, she found two of her friends already seated on the deck. They had ordered her coffee and a plate of fruit. They all embraced and exchanged greetings. "How's the baby, Maria?" Andy asked. "Better, thanks. She was just getting a tooth." Andy settled into her seat. She hung her bag on the back of her chair. "Where's Stacy?" she asked as she gazed contentedly out over the white sandy beach to the azure blue waters of the Gulf of Mexico. The smell of the ocean was stronger here than near her house, and it lacked any hint of decay, any suggestion that there was life other than the sea. The water was a blue-green that try as they might, humans could never replicate. She knew that the water was warm, not because she had felt it recently, but because while the air temperature might facilitate at this time of year, the Gulf was always still warm in October. Most days it was as inviting as a warm bath, a tranquil blue salty bath. She turned her eyes to the sky, which was a perfect shade of light blue. It was Andy's favorite color. It was also one of the reasons she chose the University of North Carolina for medical school. As far as she was concerned, Tar Heel blue was the best color in the world. I call that, when the sky's that color in October, I call it the October blue. There's no other color like it. Even Tar Heel blue is not that color. She had a case she had to post early, but she said in her text she would be here, Maria answered. She gave Andy a look that said, except I know you don't check your messages unless if it's your call service. Andy checked her phone and saw the group text she had missed. Oh, look at that. Here it is, she said with a chuckle. Aphrodite, how's this work? She took a sip of coffee and bit her fruit. And a bite of her fruit. The apples were bitter and the melon felt old and chewy. She pushed the plate away from her. Meh, fine. I had to throw a guy out last night. He got all handsy. Did Tank come in to help, or did you actually have to deal with this guy yourself? Andy asked. Aphrodite sat back and tossed her long blonde black curls over her shoulder. You know what I mean. Tank threw the guy out. Maria and Andy laughed. Occupational hazard, I guess, Maria said. All I get is colds. Aphrodite was a dancer. She was good, Broadway worthy, actually, but she didn't fit in with the tall, skinny sticks in New York, so she had come home and now she freelanced. She worked freelance. Work for a short, curvy dancer was limited, however. Kelly and Andy took Aphrodite's belly dance class when time allowed, but sometimes teaching wasn't enough to pay the bills. That meant dancing at gentlemen's clubs every now and then to supplement her income. Andy saw Stacy step out of the main restaurant and head toward them. Stacy was tall, taller than Andy by far. She was Andy's opposite in most other ways as well. Where Andy had dark curly hair, Stacy had ginger blonde straight hair. Andy's eyes were dark, her skin characteristically olive, giving away her Mediterranean heritage. Stacy was Greek as well, but her eyes and skin were fair. She always joked that her father must have been the mailman. Sorry, I'm late. Dead guy found in his house last night. The police insisted I post him this morning. Stacy was the medical examiner for the county north of them. Ooh, I read about that in the paper this morning, Maria said. Home invasion or something like that. The dude was pumped full of narcs and benzos, so I'm sure if it was an invasion, he wouldn't have been able to fight anyone off. Stacy remarked dismissively. She picked up a piece of melon from Andy's discarded plate, but spit it back out almost immediately. Everyone nodded. Drug-related deaths were way too common in this part of the state. The waitress came by with coffee, and Stacy ordered breakfast. It's all that primary care docs handing out oxy like it's candy, Stacy said over the rim of her coffee mug. She winked at Andy. Just kidding, Andy. Sort of. She said the last couple of words under her breath. Don't hate on PCPs, Andy said. You're the one who decided to hang out with the dead. I get wine and cookies at Christmas. You just get the remains of the victims of drunk driving. Ew, ladies, really? Aphrodite claimed. That was so low, Andy. Andy rubbed her eyes with the base of her palms. Sorry, she said. Stay. Speaking of dead bodies, Maria and Aphrodite sighed and sat back in their chairs. Every week the doctor talk. You guys know this is annoying, right? Maria said. No. I'm curious about the guy they dragged out of Wild Boar Springs last week. Did you guys hear about that? Andy continued. Aphrodite said no. Maria said she had. Stacy looked uncomfortable. Stacy, did Did you get that post? Andy asked. I did. I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about it, though. This caught Aphrodite's attention. Ooh, this sounds intriguing. Do tell, she said as she leaned forward. Didn't you hear her? Maria said as she playfully tapped Aphrodite's arm. She's not supposed to talk about it. But no, really, come on, Stace. What happened? Andy tried to keep her face neutral. Stacy did not seem to be fooled, however. She looked at Andy through narrowed eyelids. Yeah, I haven't been told to not say anything. It's just the investigation is still ongoing, she said eventually. I thought it was a dive accident, said Maria. The paper said that his partner got the bends, was taken down to Indian Rocks Hospital for decompression treatment. The story didn't say if he lived or not, though. Dive accidents, especially in any one of the caves and caverns that dotted the state, were also common. Usually, an overconfident open water scuba diver would go past the warning sign telling people who were not trained to stay out of the cave. It's dark in the tunnels and people easily get disoriented. They run out of air and then someone has to go in and pull their body out. I hear he did, Andy said. She shifted in her seat as Stacy stared at her. What? I did. Pete told me. Maria groaned. God, Andy, why do you even talk to him still? Andy sighed. We've been over this, okay? For Callie. It's for Callie. How's that working out for you? Stacy asked. He's still a pain in my ass. Andy's voice was muffled from where her face rested in her hands. And Stacy, you should understand, you too, Aphrodite. You know how the community gets. My poor mom has to answer questions about why we don't live together, and the kids at church look at Callie. I just don't want her to get a reputation. For what? Maria asked. For having divorced parents? Come on. Look, the sins of the father and all that. Divorce reflects poorly on the kids, at least in our community. It could even affect who she marries one day, Andy said defensively. That's so stupid, Stacy stated, shaking her head. Shut up, Stace. You don't have kids. Everyone just thinks you're a lesbian, Andy retorted. And I don't care. You should try it, Andy. Not caring what any of those old judgmental crap, Isabel. Coots no, yeah. Kutsambolas think of you at church, Stacy said. I'm with Stacy, said Maria. Me too, added Aphrodite. Anyway, Andy said, Pete told me the guy with the bends lived. Please tell me he didn't tell you this when you gave in to a little post-divorce sex, Aphrodite asked. Oh, hell no, Andy answered. We just chatted about it when I dropped Callie off last night. Another groan from Maria. This time she was joined by Aphrodite. So he was actually there when you got there? Aphrodite asked. Pete had a habit of conveniently not being where he was supposed to be when it was time for the kid handoff. He had all kinds of excuses, including, I had to close and you were late. Not that he couldn't text or call Andy to make other arrangements. That would be adult and responsible. Two things Andy would never accuse Pete of being. Then he would conveniently not hear his phone all weekend. Andy didn't mind more time with Callie, but it was the principle behind the behavior that made Andy want to strangle him. I make sure to make it before closing time, Andy answered. Aphrodite mumbled something under her breath. Andy's friends were not Pete's biggest fans. Andy changed the subject back to the dive accident again. So, Stacy, what was the post like for the dead diver? Stacy's light eyes lingered on Andy's face before she answered. My, you're persistent this morning, aren't you? The exam was not normal. It didn't show the normal drowning findings. I mean, he definitely drowned, but there were other things. I had to call the police once I saw the bruising on his arms. This gets better. This is getting better, Aphrodite said. What kind of bruising? Getting better, Aphrodite? A man died, Andy chuckled. You know what I mean, Aphrodite said. It's getting more intriguing. Look, my life is full of drama because some men can't keep their hands to themselves. This is new and different drama for me. Fair enough, Andy replied. He had bruising on his cheek, Stacy continued, and his lip was torn. It looked like his regulator had been forcefully removed from his mouth, like someone had ripped it out. She made a quick movement with her hand, mimicking tearing something away from her face. She continued, the bruising on his arms was hard to find. He had been in the water for a few hours once they got him out, and by the time he got to me, he was decomposing already. But I definitely found hand-shaped bruising on his upper and lower arms. Andy sat back and took a breath. This information did not surprise her. She knew that her gut feeling about Anthony Segal had been strong. So strong, in fact, that it would not surprise her if he was capable of murder. Ooh. And that's it. Ooh, right on time. So what you guys think? Yay! I like that, Izzy. Very, very good. Very good. All right, ladies. It can be found on Amazon, but Izzy, I'm sorry, I do not remember how much it was. So if you can tell them, that would be great. Tomorrow night, where am I at? Wrong way. Tomorrow night, oh, it's not that one. This is a different book. Naughty Alice? Is that what tomorrow night is? $2.99 ebook. That's what I was thinking it was, but I always hate to quote unless I know. You're not getting any more, Nina. You get too much as it is. All right. Naughty Alice by Jennifer Johnson is tomorrow night. It is part of the LaSasha Flames Torted Tales, Book 3. It's more or less fairy tales gone haywire. Oh, yes, Naughty Alice. You want to hear something good? You need to come hear me read erotica. The girls think I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that the girls think I'm getting better at those than I used to be. Yeah, this looks like it's going to be good. All right, everybody. So until tomorrow night, I want everybody to have a good evening. Thank you, Izzy, for letting us read your book. I greatly appreciate it. And same time, same place tomorrow night. Everybody have a good evening and happy reading.